Relatives say that victim was out celebrating her birthday, which was this past Thursday, when she was shot and killed on the south side. She leaves behind 6 children, the youngest less than a year old.
She was a wonderful person, kept a smile on her face, good parent, everything about her was good.
As the sun dips below the horizon, the swarming energy of Chicago's daytime streets gives way to a quieter, more reflective atmosphere. The city, alive with the sounds of cars and chatter during the day, now whispers stories of its inhabitants. Among these is the story of Jamia Taylor, known to her friends and family as Maya. She was the heart of her community, a mother of 6 whose laughter could light up a room and whose kindness knew no bounds. In this city of broad shoulders, Maya stood out as someone who always reached out with helping hands. She had an infectious joy, a vibrant spirit that drew people to her, making her a beloved figure in her neighborhood. But then, on what should have been a joyful celebration of another year of life, something went terribly wrong. The night of her birthday celebration, a night that began with music and smiles, ended in a way no one could have imagined. Maya, the community beacon, was suddenly gone. What happened on that cold evening that transformed a celebration into a scene of despair? Who would harm someone so full of life and loved by many? This is the story we are about to unfold, a story of joy, heartbreak, and the quest for justice. As we delve into the details of that fateful night, we seek to understand the impact of this tragedy on her family, her friends, and the fabric of the community that loved her so dearly. As we peel back the layers of this profound tragedy, if you find yourself moved by stories of human spirit and community, I encourage you to like and subscribe to join us in exploring more stories that touch the heart and challenge the mind. It was supposed to be a night like any other, a night filled with joy, laughter, and a sense of celebration. Jamia Taylor, affectionately known as Maya to her friends and family, had just turned 29. The room was alive with energy, buzzing with the warmth of loved ones gathered to celebrate her special day. She was the center of it all. Her infectious smile, her laughter, and the way she made everyone feel welcome. To know her was to love her. Maya was more than just a mother to 6 beautiful children. She was the heartbeat of her community. Her friends, her family, and even strangers who encountered her couldn't help but be drawn to her light. The night began with excitement as Maya posted her usual lively updates on social media, sharing videos and photos of the fun she was having. In each frame, her joy was unmistakable. She laughed with her friends, shared inside jokes, and showed off her beautiful family. Her voice could be heard, bright and full of life, as she chatted with those around her. She was happy, so happy, in fact, that you could almost feel the warmth radiating from her through the phone screen. Guests gathered around, dancing to the music, enjoying the moments. The lights twinkled as the party unfolded. Maya was in her element, basking in the celebration of another year of life. There were no worries, no stress, only laughter and love. It was the kind of night that felt like it would never end, the kind of night everyone hoped would last forever. Then, everything changed. Out of nowhere, a loud sound pierced the air, a sound that didn't belong, a sound that would forever mark this night in tragedy. The music was cut short, the laughter abruptly silenced. Panic spread across the room. At first, no one knew what had happened. A few seconds felt like a lifetime. And then, Maya fell to the ground, clutching her chest. The shock on her face was clear, but it was too late to understand what was happening. Guests rushed to her side, but it was clear Maya had been shot. The chaos that followed was unlike anything anyone had ever witnessed. Screams echoed, calls for help filled the air. Someone had called 911, but time was moving too quickly, slipping through their fingers like sand. Maya was barely conscious as she lay there, her life slipping away with every passing second. The room that had once been full of music and happiness was now filled with fear. People stood frozen, unsure of what to do next. How could this happen? Why would this happen? Who could harm such a beautiful, kind-hearted person? A desperate call for help rang out, the urgency in the voice of the caller unmistakable. "We need help now." It wasn't just an emergency. It was a cry for a life that was quickly fading, a plea for the one person who still had a future ahead of her. The ambulance arrived in what felt like an eternity, but Maya's condition was critical. She was rushed to the University of Chicago hospital, and her family followed, each one of them praying for a miracle. Friends called, hoping for good news, begging for something, anything, to give them hope. But there was nothing. The medical team fought, but the damage had been done. Maya's life was taken far too soon. As the hours passed, the news spread. Those who knew Maya, those who loved her, were left in disbelief. How could this happen? It didn't make sense. Maya was always there for everyone. She was the one who gave, who helped, who supported. She was the kind of person who never hesitated to step in and do what needed to be done. But now, she was gone. Her laughter, her presence, the way she made everyone feel like they belonged, it was all gone. Who would do this to her? Who would take the life of someone who had so much love to give? And why? The questions flooded everyone's minds. The loss was overwhelming. Maya was a mother, a daughter, a friend. She was someone who made the world a better place simply by being in it. As her family sat in the hospital, waiting for news, the weight of the moment pressed down on them. The love they felt for her, the grief that had suddenly taken over, they couldn't wrap their minds around it. It didn't make sense. She was supposed to be here. She was supposed to live. And so, the search for answers began. The pain of losing her only deepened with each unanswered question. The police began their investigation, trying to piece together the events that led to that fateful moment. What had triggered this? Who was responsible for taking her away from the world? What had happened that night that made someone pull that trigger? The tragedy was undeniable, but so was the love Maya left behind. The questions that followed were not just about the why, but about the how. How could someone do this to someone who had so much love to give? How could someone harm a mother, a daughter, a friend? Maya was gone, but the fight for justice had just begun. The grief, the confusion, and the deep ache in the hearts of those who loved her were only the beginning. This was the start of a journey, one that would demand answers and hold those responsible accountable. The night that began in celebration ended in heartbreak, but it also sparked a fire. The community was left to grapple with the loss, but they would not forget Maya. Her memory would live on, even if the questions surrounding her death were still unanswered. And so, the search for justice began, and as the investigation unfolded, the world began to wonder. Who could have done this to Jamia Taylor? Who would take a life so full of promise, so full of love? The story was far from over, and the truth was yet to be uncovered. The news of Jamia Taylor's tragic death spread quickly through the streets of Chicago, leaving a city stunned and heartbroken. A young mother, taken from her family in the blink of an eye. People who had known her, even in passing, were shaken. In a city that had seen its fair share of violence, this loss cut deeper. It wasn't just about losing a person. It was about losing someone who had touched so many lives. The woman who was always there. The one who lit up a room with her laughter. The mother who gave her everything to her children, now gone. In the days that followed, the community came together in grief. They held vigils in her honor, lit candles to remember her spirit, and shared stories about the impact she had on their lives. The streets that were once filled with celebration now felt empty, as if the city itself was mourning. People gathered to remember Jamia for who she was, a loving mother, a devoted friend, and a community pillar. Her death wasn't just a personal tragedy for her family. It was a collective loss for everyone who knew her. In one corner of the city, a small group of people stood in a quiet park, holding candles and praying for justice. Some were friends who had known Jamia since childhood. Others were strangers who felt compelled to join in the grief of a woman they never met but whose life meant something to them. The air was thick with emotion, and tears fell freely as people reflected on what Jamia's life had meant to them. They spoke of her kindness, her generosity, and the way she always put others first, no matter the cost. She was one of the best, a longtime friend said, her voice shaking with emotion. She was always there for me. She never asked for anything in return. She just gave. And now she's gone. and we're all just lost without her. The family, too, struggled to come to terms with the loss. Her mother, overcome with grief, spoke to the press, her eyes red from crying. "She was a good girl," her mother said, choking on the words. "She didn't deserve this. My baby didn't deserve this. She had so much life left to live." As the days turned into weeks, the community's grief began to spark a call for change. People realized that Jamia's death wasn't just an isolated incident. It was part of a larger problem. Violence, gunshots, and the loss of life were all too common in the city, and it felt as though the cycle would never end unless something changed. The pain of Jamia's loss became a catalyst for conversations about safety, responsibility, and community action. The city, shaken to its core, began to ask the difficult questions. What could have been done differently? What needs to change to stop another tragedy like this from happening again? In the wake of Jamia's death, community leaders stood together, calling for action. They held meetings with local officials, demanding better protection for neighborhoods and safer streets for families. The tragedy sparked safety initiatives, urging the city to focus on youth programs, gun control, and stronger support systems for families facing hardship. No one wanted another life to be cut short like Maya's. They didn't want another mother, daughter, or friend to be taken from their families so suddenly. Her story began to fuel a growing movement, one that brought together families, local leaders, and activists who demanded change. There was a renewed sense of urgency to address the root causes of violence in Chicago, and Jamia's name became a rallying cry for those seeking a safer city. It wasn't just about protecting the next person. It was about honoring Maya's memory and ensuring that her children, her family, and her community didn't have to live with this same pain again. Right now, we want to hear from you. Have you seen similar signs of violence or warning signs in your community? What can be done to stop this from happening again? Take a moment to answer our poll, and let's keep this conversation going. It's time to come together and take action to protect the ones we love. As more people spoke out, the hope was clear. Jamia's death should not be in vain. Her life and the love she gave to everyone she met could still make a difference. The community, through its grief, began to find strength in each other. It became more than just a remembrance of Maya. It became a movement for change. The call to action after Jamia's tragic death was clear. Justice needed to be served. But with every step, more questions seemed to arise, and the answers were never easy to find. The night had started with so much hope, so much joy, yet ended in heartbreak. Now, it was up to the authorities to piece together the fragments of that night, to find out who could have been responsible for taking such a beloved person from this world. The Chicago Police Department jumped into action, determined to unravel the mystery surrounding Jamia's death. Detectives scoured the scene, talking to witnesses and analyzing every clue that could lead them to the truth. The question that lingered in everyone's mind was the same. Who would want to hurt someone so full of life? Jamia didn't have enemies. She was a mother, a friend, a community member. The more they dug, the more the investigation began to show there were people who might have had reasons to harm her, but the answers remained elusive. As detectives worked tirelessly, they discovered that there had been some tension in Jamia's life before that night. A few weeks earlier, there had been a dispute involving a person who had been seen with her at various events, a person who, unbeknownst to many, had a long history of involvement in conflicts. The name that kept coming up in conversations was Terry Leah Bailey, also known by the street name Kidna Brooks. She had been involved in arguments with Jamia, and though the details were unclear, something about their relationship raised a red flag for the detectives. Was this the person responsible for the tragic night? As the investigation pressed on, it became apparent that Bailey wasn't the only person who could be connected to Jamia's death. There were others in her circle, people with whom she had crossed paths, people who had mixed motives. The police quickly began connecting dots, tracing phone calls, social media activity, and even surveillance footage to understand what had led to that fateful moment. In the days following the murder, rumors spread, and the walls of secrecy started to crumble. It became clear that this wasn't a random act of violence. It was personal. The more the police uncovered, the more complex the situation became. Jamia's life, the people she interacted with, and the secrets she kept started to paint a picture. It was a puzzle that seemed too difficult to put together, but each new lead brought them closer. Surveillance footage from nearby buildings showed a man, possibly Terry Leah Bailey, leaving the area right around the time of the shooting. But it wasn't just him. There were others who had been seen talking to her just hours before she was killed. Was this a crime of passion, or was it something else entirely? The police then began to focus on the events leading up to the night of Jamia's death. Was there a conversation, an argument, or something more that pushed someone over the edge? With every clue uncovered, the complexity of the case grew. Detectives started to question everyone who had been in the area that night, gathering testimonies and piecing together the puzzle. One piece of the puzzle was Jamia's online presence. She had posted regularly on social media, sharing the good, the bad, and everything in between. As her followers went back through her posts and comments, they found hints of tensions between her and certain people. The night of her birthday, she had posted a video joking about how anyone who wanted to be her big daddy had to prove it. But beneath the jokes, there were whispers of something more, something less innocent, just under the surface. Could it be that these casual posts had led to something darker? Did someone take her words the wrong way? The investigation was full of twists, and the detectives had to sift through every detail carefully, looking for clues that could break the case wide open. Terry Leah Bailey, the woman at the center of suspicion, denied any involvement, but the pieces were starting to fit together. Detectives uncovered a past marked by conflict, jealousy, and resentment. Bailey had been known for her temper and had a history of violent behavior, but could she have gone this far? The evidence was mounting, but still, there was no concrete proof that she was the one who pulled the trigger. The case became even more complicated as other names came into the frame. People with motives, people who had felt wronged by Jamia, started to surface. But even with all this new information, no one could say for certain who had been responsible for ending her life. It was clear that this case was going to take time. There was no easy solution, no clear-cut answers. The police were working around the clock, but in a case as complex as this one, there was no telling how long it would take to bring those responsible to justice. Now that you've heard about the suspects and the unfolding investigation, we want to know your thoughts. Who do you think is behind Jamia's tragic death? What do you think the police need to uncover next to solve this case? Share your comments below, and let's discuss where the investigation could go from here. There are moments in life when a person's spirit touches everyone they meet, leaving an imprint that can never be erased. Jamia Taylor, or Maya, was one of those rare souls. Her laugh was contagious, her heart big enough to embrace everyone who crossed her path. She dreamed of a better life for her children, worked tirelessly to give them the future she never had, and always made sure that everyone around her felt valued, no matter how small their need. To her, family came first. Being a mother was everything to her. Maya's children were her world, 6 little lives that she nurtured, loved, and sacrificed for. And now, they would have to grow up without her. They would miss her laughter, her comforting embrace, and the way she made them feel safe and loved. But even in the face of this unimaginable loss, Maya's family was determined to honor her legacy. Her family, led by her mother and closest relatives, stood strong in the face of their grief. They were devastated by the loss, yet they knew they had to keep going, not just for themselves, but for Maya's children. They started speaking out, pushing for justice, and demanding answers. Her mother, in her heartbreak, became a powerful voice, sharing her pain with the world, making sure that Jamia's death wasn't just another statistic in a long list of senseless acts of violence. "This can't be in vain," her mother said, tears streaming down her face. She mattered. She mattered so much to all of us. The family didn't want to just mourn. They wanted to make sure that Maya's life, her beautiful, selfless life, was remembered for what it was, a story of love, dedication, and strength. They spoke about the dreams she had for her children, how she wanted to see them grow up, achieve their goals, and live in a world where they didn't have to worry about losing their mother to senseless violence. After hearing the powerful words from her family, it's clear how important it is to keep this conversation alive. Help the family's call for justice reach as many people as possible. Share this video and spread the word. Maya's legacy deserves to be remembered, and her story needs to inspire change. Let's keep fighting for her and her children, and make sure that no other family has to endure what they've been through. Jamia Taylor's story has been one of love, loss, and a community's determination to find justice. From the moment her life was senselessly taken, her family, friends, and the city of Chicago were left in shock. But through the pain, something beautiful emerged. A call for change, a push for justice, and the desire to ensure that no one else would have to feel the same grief. Maya's legacy will not be forgotten. Her spirit of generosity, her love for her children, and the hope she had for a better world continue to inspire everyone who knew her. The fight is far from over. There are still questions that need answers, and there is still work to be done. As we remember Jamia, it's important to stand with her family and support efforts to make our communities safer. We can all be part of the change. If you believe in justice and want to help keep Jamia's memory alive, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for updates. Share this story and help spread the message. Together, we can make a difference.